I'm not going to talk about smart. Everything that Franklin said is correct, and you have a formula to move forward and become a smart nation. That, in many ways, is the easy part. What I'm going to be talking about is that messy thing called the people that have to adopt smart. Okay? That's the challenge. And so I'm going to be talking about smart nations, but primarily smart design. And when I talk about smart design, I'm talking about that thing that interfaces from the smart conceptual infrastructure to the man and the woman on the street. And how do you design for them? How do you design for adoption? How do you design for things that work? And I'm going to be talking not about only 2016, because I think we have a propensity to talk about now and the future, but really all this stuff has happened historically. We've always tried to create smart communities, maybe with different technology. And I'm going to be going all the way back to the medieval period with Giotto and take you through to jobs. So let's go. So as we move forward, remember that we have to look back. So I was born in a small mining town called Kitwe in Zambia. And I didn't have much to do there. We didn't have television. So I had to squirrel myself away in my parents' library. And in my parents' library, they didn't also have much. They had a few vinyl records, and they had some old dog-eared books and magazines. And one of the compilations we had was from my grandparents called Punch Magazine. I don't know if you know Punch Magazine. It is now a defunct magazine. But in its day, it was the satirical pulse of England. And Punch basically did a tongue-in-cheek sort of Steve Colbert or something of the equivalent. And here in this particular publication, which is December 1906, they challenged their writers and their illustrators to come up with a forecast to 1907. What was going to happen in 1907? And much of it was very tongue-in-cheek, very satirical. But here, for example, they said the forecast for 1907, daylight fireworks. That's what's going to happen in 1907. They're going to invent daylight fireworks. But further on in the publication, there's this forecast for 1907 where they have a scene from Hyde Park in London. And here you have a lady and a man sitting in the park under a tree, bucolic scene, beautiful. And what do they say? The development of wireless, a scene from Hyde Park. Okay, so let's look closely at this. You see the antenna out of their hats, picking up that signal, that broadband, yeah? And on their laps, a box, I presume a laptop configuration, yeah? And then you have this ticker tape, which in those days was the equivalent of data, right? Ticker tape. And this was tongue-in-cheek what the future would bring. So let's go forward. To any scene in any city, I'm sure if you went downtown, you would find this scene somewhere. A couple, sitting together, not communicating with each other. In this scene, we have, it says, you can't see at the bottom, but basically she's reading ambulatory messages, love messages, and he's picking up racing results. Okay? And here, I'm sure the same thing's happening. She's picking up a few sort of instant messages from a boyfriend, and he's picking up some sports results, right? Nothing much has happened. What we have is a focus on communication and data. This idea that people need to communicate with one another, whether they're together or whether they are apart. We need to communicate to build a smart society, but it starts here, right? And so this is a friend of mine, Marty Cooper. Now, Marty Cooper, back in 1973, invented this thing. They used to call it the brick, the first wireless phone. Yeah? And Marty, I spoke to Marty because I'm writing this book called If Things Could Speak, which is about all these ambient things that maybe make our smart society, or maybe they don't. And I said, Marty, what is the future of the cell phone? You invented it. Okay, so he says the future of the cell phone will be a collection of personal devices and personal applications specifically tailored to its owner. Right? There's nothing generic about the smart society. It will be distributed in optimum locations on the user's body and will automatically and continuously optimize its configuration. We will all become smart. It is about starting here and growing outward. So, what does that mean when you talk about a smart city, a smart nation? Yes, sensors are becoming cost-effective. We can put them everywhere. You know, that's sort of table stakes now. Now we need, of course, infrastructure, whether you have broadband or whether you have sort of low power, wide access networks, which obviously you'll have to build for a smart nation. But if you look at what is really happening now, which is starting at a sort of a smart home level, do any of you have smart devices in your homes? Any of you? Yeah? Only Giovanni? Okay, a few others. Okay. They're like programming a VCR. To connect your home is one of the most challenging feats. It's much harder than building a smart nation. Okay? So what I'd like to do in this brief hour that I'm talking to you is talk about how we put the person back in the middle of this equation. How do we build for the user? How do we build human-centric design into our smart nation? Because if we don't, and you all know this, all those solutions that we're going to come up with are going to be abandoned. They're going to be thrown into the drawer, whether that's the personal drawer or the municipal drawer or the government drawer. It's going to be under the socks and it's going to be lost, right? How many things have you bought? Oh my gosh, this is the cutting edge MP3 player. Cutting edge. And then 2 years later, it's a cutting edge paperweight, right? And so how do we go and go into a technology investment which makes sure that it doesn't end up in the drawer, okay? So let me take you back, as I promised, to the medieval period, okay? So medieval period, as you know, in Europe, they had images of monks with hatchets in their heads, and they had, contortionists, and they had demonic images. None of these things existed. None of these things existed. There's not even any bones in this guy's body. That demon never existed. This was all a figment of the artist's imagination. Nobody ever really went out and said, could you pose for me? I'm actually painting a contortionist. Could you just bend backwards? No, this was all based on an idea of what the world was like. And then we got to the end of the medieval period, and there was an artist called Giotto. At the end of the medieval period, he's supposedly in the medieval period, but he is the guy who brought us out of the medieval period into the Renaissance. And the reason I bring up Giotto is he was the first guy who actually looked and said, oh my gosh, there's a human there. I'm going to paint a human. What do they look like? How do they feel? How do they interact with each other? Right? And he painted this chapel in Padua. And I was there last year. And if you ever get to Padua, you've got to go to this chapel, because it is the most amazing thing. He basically told the story of Jesus, and it looks like a Snapchat. I mean, it's every scene is illustrated. It's the whole story. And what's so beautiful about this story is it's about people. So if you actually go and look at one of the images in the story, these are people. They have depth, they have emotion. This is the first kiss in art history. You know that? Before that, there were no kisses. There was no emotion. There were no people. So suddenly what Giotto did is he brought the human back into the equation. And after that, as we know, as we moved into the Renaissance, the human actually became central. And to know the human, you had to actually go as, you know, in the 1520s, Michelangelo would go to the morgue and dissect cadavers so that he would understand how the muscles worked and the bones worked so that he could actually draw a human. Now, why am I talking to you about art? Is because you can't create a smart nation without understanding who's going to be using the smart nation, understanding the sinew, the muscle, the bones of your society, so that it actually takes form around that, as opposed to some conceptual notion, right? It's important to understand what's under the surface and accommodate and build for all those messy humans. Because they're the worst. They're difficult to build for. And so we know that 500 years later, we now have a technology society, right? And here at Comdex in 2001, Bill Gates stood up and said, hey, technology society, I've got a solution for you. And what was that solution? Oh boy, it was super cool. It was super cool with the tablet PC. Remember the tablet PC? No, nobody remembers the tablet PC. No, because I think there was like 180,000 distributed, nobody bought them, and then they trashed it. But everybody loved it. Who loved it? The engineers loved it. And he said, at Comdex, this is going to be tremendous for Microsoft because all our engineers are taking the units home and they love it. Well, that's the kiss of death. Because there was no sinew, there was no bones, there was no muscle. It was all a medieval picture, right? And then a few years later, Mr. Jobs gets up on the stage, and what does he bring to the table? An iPhone. And the iPhone was so revolutionary. Why? Not because of technology, right? A few months before that Steve came up with the iPhone, they had launched, LG had launched the Prada phone. Do you guys remember the Prada phone? No, nobody remembers the Prada phone. But it was a beautiful design, Prada, right? And it had compacted touch. It had everything this phone has, except it didn't understand the human behind it. So when Steve can pinch and zoom and say that, you know, data is behind this, and your phone is a window into data, suddenly there are long lines around the street saying, I want an iPhone, right? Oh my gosh, I just got a tablet. Oh my gosh, I got the iPad. That's a different experience, I can tell you, to the person who picked up the tablet PC, okay? And people were thrilled, it delighted them. This was somebody who understood how humans interact with data. So when you come pedal forward to 2016, what are the services that are being embraced by our societies? Uber is one, right? Have you guys used Uber? Do they have Uber on the island?
Not yet.
Not yet. But at some point, you will use Uber or an Uber equivalent. And the amazing thing about Uber is that the experience you have on Uber is fundamentally different from the experience you have in the dusty cab. Okay? A dusty cab can come by you, physically there. You can look at the guy, and you will still feel more comfortable ordering from your phone, and that's fundamentally different from the way we've looked at digital before. Before, when we looked at digital, it was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I want to put my credit card there. I don't know who's out there. Suddenly, digital is warmth. You have a digital bear hug. There's a sense of if I order through Uber, I'm going to know Bill's name. I'm going to see him come. He's going to see me. It's going to be a rating. I'm going to know he's 4 stars. He's going to know I'm 4 stars. my kid can watch Bill come, and when Bill arrives at my house, my kids run out and say, "Hey, Bill," and he says, "Hey, is Gary there?" And they say, "Yeah, he's inside." What a great experience. If Bill doesn't turn out to be great, I give him a 1-star, he gets pulled off the road. So the same happens with groceries, right? So you had a grocery store. Have you been in Centrum recently? Good experience. It's a great experience. Good food, everything's great. But you don't have, well, at least in the US, it's lost because of the competitive nature of stores. They cut away a lot of the fluff. So you don't have the little delivery boy or girl, grabbing the groceries and coming to your house and delivering to your door as it used to be in the 1950s, right? So they cut all that out. And so what happens is it's been commoditized. It's become a dusty place to go, and you don't have the warmth. And companies like Instacart have come in and said, "I'll deliver you the groceries." So suddenly you have a relationship with this guy and not the store. This guy can shop at 3 stores, and you don't care as long as he brings you what you want, right? So same with Airbnb. I'm staying in the Airbnb up in West Point. Oh my God, what an Airbnb. It's a fantastic place. But the bottom line is it's become home for me. It's a great experience. Now I'm sure it'd be a great experience to stay in this hotel too. But there, I feel like home, right? It's given me digital warmth. I knew the place. I spoke to the owner before I got here. We had developed a relationship. Digital now has become so human. And so Airbnb just rebranded themselves. People, places, love equals Airbnb. Love. And so Snapchat the same. Snapchat has been so successful because it's about a story. It's about a narrative of humans. Whereas Twitter is about information. Yeah, I guess I know you through those 140 character haikus you write, but here I know you because there's a story. And we know that Instagram's trying to adopt this formula too, because it tells a story about humans. The same with shopping. Shopping is not great when things are piled up and messy and there's a sale and you can't find size 32. But if you had a place where only the types of jeans are there, not all the sizes, and you can just say, look, I'd like to try that one, that one, that one, and suddenly you have Nadia, who used to be head of supply chain fulfillment for Amazon, opening another company called Hoint that basically allows you to pick things and they get delivered to your change room, and you just go to the change room, it's all there. Oh, and by the way, here's some shirts that may go along with it, here's a belt. There's a clienteling human relationship now, and you say in trials that they've had with this kind of system, you get 6 times the more items tried, and the recommendations by the salespeople led to an 80% lift in sales. Why? Nothing new. Yeah, okay, the technology is like there, but ultimately why you buying is because somebody's coming to your change room and saying, "Hey, Gary, try these on. I think they'd go with that." Right? You're not looking for jeans and then lining up at the change room and then going in and trying it on and say, "I don't know if it works for me," and going. Suddenly there's a different relationship. Technology is always all about understanding the human behind it. And so, yeah, distribution, the distribution models and sales models have changed. Amazon is about, a centralized model. We have decentralized models with eBay, and of course with the advent of blockchain, which I can tell you will be the pillar of a smart nation. It's about distributed buying because it's a trustless economy in blockchain. You don't have to care if you trust them or not. It's about recommendations. It's about people being in a building block economy, which I'm not going to go into. But the bottom line is blockchain is fundamentally changing the way people interact in the financial sector. So here's a company called Abra that helps people send money from one country to another. So in Canada, we have a lot of new immigrants, for example, from the Philippines, who want to send money back to the Philippines, and they'd have to go, to Western Union, and they'd have to worry about the Forex, the currency exchange. and they have to take an hour out of their day to go to the Western Union. Somebody's mother has to go an hour out of her day to go to Western Union on this side. Suddenly, you can do peer-to-peer exchanges through blockchain, and Western Union's out of business. Forex isn't an issue because blockchain doesn't have any Forex. And this is a new economy overnight. So, but let's go to something maybe we relate to, right? We all relate to that. That is a delicious gourmet sandwich. And that delicious gourmet sandwich is delivered in Melbourne through a application called Jaffleshoot. And what it does is it creates a community of interest around that sandwich. And so what happens is you sign up online and you buy that sandwich, and then you have to come to a location which is only told to you the day before and wait for that sandwich to be parachute down. Okay? And what happens is all you had to do is pay online, it tells you where to go, and it arrives. Well, isn't that our economy? You pay online, you say, I want it delivered here, or it tells you where it's delivered, and magic. We're in a smart nation. It comes from the sky. But what this tells you is, yes, this is a millennial kind of gig. I mean, it's cute. But the bottom line is it's a community that is being built around an experience. And that is what a smart nation is. It's about understanding what that community needs and building a mechanism around it. Why do they line up to eat these? Okay, it's a good sandwich. But it's also an experience. They share a common experience. They're all sharing an experience. And that data experience is the data experience you need to give them. It may not be around a sandwich, but it will be around something. And that's how you got to get the average guy and gal in Curacao to react to the service that you deliver. And in most cases, they will be able to build it on your APIs. So how do we find those smart ideas to build our nation? How do we find them? So I want to digress, right? I want to digress because, oh my gosh, what an incredible island. I was up in Playa Grande, swimming with the turtles, and out in the bay, I saw a dolphin. Amazing. What an amazing experience. And then at night, these guys come around, right? These are southern long-nosed bats, which you have all over the island, right? But why? Well, Gary, why are you talking to me about this? This is a really big, digression. Well, actually, it's not. What I want to talk to you about is convergent evolution. Okay? So this guy and this guy are not related. Well, it's related in as much as everything is related genetically on this planet, but they're not really direct ancestors of each other. And they definitely didn't invent the prime means of communication together. They did it independently. How do they get around? How do they navigate, both of these? Sonar. But they developed that independently. And you know how hard it is to develop a technology like sonar? 200 genes independently had to change the same way. If you get 2 genes developing the same way, you should go out and buy a lottery ticket right now. Okay? 200 is almost impossible. It is impossible. But it happens. Let me give you another example. So, any of you guys have problems with termites? Yeah? Sometimes, right? So you're going to call professional pest control. I hear it's the best on the island. Maybe. But you're going to call them, and when they call them, and when you look at the termites, I want you to remember this, that these two ants and termites may look very similar, right? They have similar communities. They have smart societies, incredible smart societies. They're the most social example of something outside of our human society that we have. But this guy, the ant, descended from bees. And this guy, the termite, descended from cockroaches. Totally different lineage. Totally different lineage. But they developed farming techniques, both of them independently. We all know that they have a queen, that they have an army, and social dynamics that are very similar. What are you talking about, Gary? What I want to say is that convergent evolution is the same with technology. There are such things as smart ideas. The idea of sonar, the idea of creating social societies like that, existed before those guys ever came into the marketplace. And they knew somehow that they would have to find that smart idea, because it existed. Multiple avenues have developed to find that smart idea. It existed a priori. And so when you look at technology and you look at Bell and his invention of the phone, we all know that at the same time that he was getting his patent, Gray was getting his patent. The same year, like within a month. Independently invented something which is the reason we're all here, right? There is such a thing as good ideas. They exist. We need to find them. Smart ideas exist, and we know that. And the Nobel Prize for chemistry and physics is sometimes given to 3 or 4 people at the same time in different countries that invented something at the same time. Good ideas exist. We need to find them. We don't need to reinvent them. What we do need to do is adapt them to the people who are going to use them. So let's look here. You go back 1950s, there were ads from the power companies, right? About new electric living. Yeah? It sounds dated, but here, if you actually read through the text, you'll see they talk about television screens will hang from the wall. Well, they were right? So what else were they right about? So the big thing is that they said that at some point, because of the new electrical industry, these cars are going to be driven by themselves. And what did they say about that? They said, highways will be made safe by electricity. No traffic jams, no collisions, no driver fatigue. Well, doesn't that sound like something that Google would tell you? Yeah, doesn't it? And it did. I mean, these guys are reinventing the way we drive, and it's not that they, just like Steve Jobs, it's not that they are reinventing a concept, a technology concept. It's been around from the day that we had wheels. What they're doing is adapting this concept so that the humans that get into that car without a driver's wheel, which is not a steering wheel, which is not, that's a bit of a leap of faith, right? They're making them comfortable. They're understanding the needs of that human driver so that they can adopt and feel comfortable with the technology that's coming down the pipe. So when you hear that Google's driverless cars are now legally the same as human drivers, that's a huge feat, because essentially a technology is being embraced by the regulators as something that is a driver. That's amazing. So now technology becomes human. And that's the only way that you're going to get into one of these guys. If you feel comfortable that they have the same integrity as you as a driver, or better. They have to have a higher standard. But it's still a challenge, and we know that. What's one of the biggest problems with driving a smart car? Humans. I told us, messy things. If it wasn't for the humans, we'd be better off. We'd have such smart societies. But they plow into your car even though you're a good driver. You're a Google Echo. You're a Ford smart car. Detours. Hey, we just changed the way that the road is going today. An hour ago. It's not on Google Maps. How do I meander around that? Again, those messy humans. Ethical decisions. It's difficult to make an ethical decision, even for us, right? A guy runs out in the road. We have 2 cars on either side. Who do we kill? lines vanishing. You don't have snow here, but I hear when it rains really hard every 4 years, lines vanish. Well, how do you drive if you have no way of steering according to the lines on the road? And then puddles. Puddles are a big problem, right? Because it may look like a puddle, but it may be a hole. And the computer system can't really detect. But the bottom line is, it's not easy to be human, right? Because humans have the ability, of course, to navigate that ambiguity, right? So I want to take you to this, which is, it's actually in Toronto, Zella and Smith gave birth essentially to this. It's really just an industrial-size paint bucket that they made into a robot, right? And the challenge that they gave this robot, called the Hitchbot, was to hitch from Halifax, which is on one side of Canada, all the way to Victoria, which is on the other side of Canada. And it had to do it totally independently. So it sits on the highway, it puts its thumb out, and it says, I want to go to BC, BCO bus, British Columbia. And this bot got all the way across Canada, which is quite a commute. And it got there by basically engaging with people on the highway, building trust, getting into their cars, and getting them, of course, to secure it, just like a kid in the back seat. It had basic conversational skills, probably like most hitchhikers. You know, they probably can ask you how you're doing, and the weather's nice today, and it can send photos home, you know, based on GPS integration. And it got all the way across to Victoria, and then it went on a little jaunt through Europe, and then it started in Boston and was going to hitchhike all the way to San Francisco. But look at this. What technology are we going to build where a toddler comes up and hugs an industrial-size paint container? It's not about the technology, guys. It's about building trust. So what is a digital relationship? Well, when this Hitchbot hit Philadelphia, it was vandalized. And the whole world was up in arms because we had built a relationship with it. And that's what you need to do. Build a relationship with the technology so hopefully, you know, when it goes down, people are up in arms because they want it to be there, because they have an affinity to it. So Sigmund Freud wrote a book, and in that book, Civilization and Its Discontents, he talked about a prosthetic God. He said, man has become a kind of prosthetic God. You know, a prosthetic, you lose your hand, you have a prosthetic hand. Man is a kind of prosthetic God because he puts things on himself or herself to make him bigger, stronger. I have a mic, I have a clicker, I have power, you do not. Okay? And so when he puts on all this auxiliary stuff, right? Hats, cars, whatever he has, he becomes truly magnificent. Maybe a sword is a good example, right? So what is this? This is a data sword, right? If I have this at a cocktail party, I know more than you, right? And maybe I'm a little shy at the cocktail party. It can be a shield, right? Because I don't have to talk to you. Right? So these are tools. These are things that make us stronger and better. But the problem is those organs have not grown onto him naturally. Right? He wasn't born with them. And they still give him much trouble at times. And that's our challenge, right? So as we move forward, we need to eliminate as many steps as we can in our system. So apps are great, but no apps required because apps demand a download. How many apps do you use on your phone? Honestly? Can you put them on one hand? Really? The ones that you really use? Yeah, but you probably have 100 in some folder somewhere, right? So we don't want to make it difficult. So no apps required. Apps were invented to sell iPhones. That's what they were invented for. Everything could have been done in the browser, but somebody doesn't benefit from open data, right? So no apps required. Amazon. has a patent on one-click checkout. I have bought things on Amazon by mistake many times because it's so easy. And now they're coming out with Dash and Echo, which can hear your orders in the kitchen, but Dash, the Dash button, you can put as a magnet on things that when you're there, you go, oh my gosh, I'm out of detergent. Well, I could, because I probably have this with me, I could open my Amazon account and find Tide and go one-click checkout. But that's probably 3 or 4 clicks. Here, I push this button, and at least in my city, it will be delivered to my door within the day. I have this now for everything that's important to me. I can put them all around the house, and I can click and I order. That is smart. The technology is very primitive. It's just talking through your Wi-Fi, and the account is in the cloud. It's not very sophisticated. This is brilliant. So we're not talking about, digitizing. We're talking about immediatizing. We're talking about doing things simply, so we can get from point A to point B. So when I have my Trojan button next to me, okay, and I'm reaching across desperately to click the Trojan button, but I miss, well, then I need my Huggies button. Okay? Life is simple. This is a smart nation. Okay, so let me take you to Sesame Street. Oh my gosh, here's my hero. You think Steve Jobs is brilliant? Here's Jim Henson. He invented or reinvented the puppet. Okay? And why was it so amazing? Well, this thing was just a sock. He put his hand into it and he built it into Kermit. That is now a global superstar. Why did he become such a figure of trust and communication? Because when Jim started, he started with Sam and Friends, and Sam and Friends literally, look at them, they just sock puppets. But what's different from puppeteering traditionally, the mold that he broke? It was, in puppeteering you had a stage, and you had strings. And people would neatly, like the kids at the parties, they'd neatly line up and sit down in front, and they'd look at the stage, and all the humans were hidden, right? And it was kind of fun. But suddenly, you're at eye level with a character. He's not on a stage. He's down here with you guys. And everybody else, including the puppeteer, is talking to him. And he's part of this community. Suddenly, you suspend belief. You can have a kid who will come to Kermit and say, and Jim will put his hand into Kermit right in front of the kid. And the kid knows that Jim just put his hand into this sock. And within a few seconds, he will turn around to his mom and Jim and say, guys, I just want to talk to Kermit alone. Right? So the big thing to take away from this is your smart society. This is what Franklin's talking about. And this is important because if these guys don't exist, that doesn't exist. But if these are the only guys that exist, it ain't gonna happen. So you have to have a balance between the infrastructure and the human interface, right? So I'm going to take you to Toronto, where I live now. And in Toronto, actually on the same street as me, it's a woman called Jane Jacobs. Now, Jane Jacobs, amazing woman. She's passed away now. She was an urban planner. And any book that you can read on Jane Jacobs is a good thing. But Jane Jacobs said once, a promenade needs promenaders. A promenade needs promenaders. You can't build a street without people that go on the street. It makes sense. You can't build a smart society without people. And so there's her house. My house is up there. Actually, if we go a little higher, you can see it. just a little bit up. But here you can still see schools. This is where my kid goes to school, Palmerston. You can sort of see the metro. You can still see people, basically. But you go up one step higher, and the people are stripped away, right? This is how people invent smart cities, at this level, at 30,000 feet. And at 30,000 feet, you get top sight, but you don't get insight. And so what I want to talk to you about is primarily that insight. Because humans are messy things. It's like a neural network, right? And it's not so simple as, straight lines. And so let's get back to Jane Jacobs. Jane Jacobs worked a lot in New York City. And in New York City, they wanted to build a highway through the bottom of Manhattan. This is the tip of Manhattan, right? Here would be like the World Trade Center and everything, and here is Soho and Greenwich Village, and they wanted to build a highway through it, basically eliminating Soho and Greenwich Village. And so that sounds really good from a topside perspective because they needed people to move from one community to another. Hey, that was efficient. But Jane Jacobs fought with this guy, Bob Moses. Bob Moses, they call him Bob the Builder. And he wanted to build that highway, and this was a great biblical battle, Jacobs against Moses. And at the final hearing, basically after protests throughout the streets of New York, at the final city hearing, Bob stands up and goes and shouts, "There is nobody against this, damn it." I don't know if he said damn it, but that was the sort of the idea. Nobody, but a bunch of mothers. Well, Bob, I got news for you. Those are the people we're trying to build a city for, right? We're not trying to build a city for some abstract notion. We're trying to build a city for people, for kids, for moms, for dads. So they won. And that's why we have Soho and Greenwich Village. They're not the best, from a topographical perspective, it looks a little messy, but they work. They're vibrant communities. And they make our world the way it is. So when you want to service somebody in your community, and this is somebody who's visually impaired, you can go, as they did in Minnesota, and spend $7 million in retrofitting the lights, so that when a visually impaired person comes to the lights, it signals that it's red or it's green. You could do that. Or you can do with what they did in Stockholm, and they can instrument the human. Screw the lights, instrument the human. And what they did is they instrumented the human with smart devices so that that person not only felt able to cross the cross lights, but felt 90% less disabled all the time. That's the right investment. You're investing in the person, not the infrastructure alone. This needs infrastructure, but the focus is on the person. And it cost $1 million per year, but it created $40 million in value. So when we design with Cisco and IBM for a smart economy, and they will be banging on your door. They will be banging on your door, and they'll be saying, "Hey, smart nation, Curacao, dude, I hear you have a budget. Let's get down. Let's do something fun." Just remember that to look smart is different from being smart. Songdo in Korea is a community that was built by Cisco, God bless them. It's an amazing place. It was a great experiment. Nobody lives there. Nobody likes it. Rio. IBM did an amazing job in Rio. They created amazing technology. But there are lots, and you can look it on the internet, lots of flaws in that smart city initiative. We just finished the Olympics. It was all ramping up to the Olympics. So what were the problems? Well, one is that limited access. You want to build an app? using all this data that they put together, you don't get access to it. There are no open APIs for you to build businesses. It's managed by IBM. There was a socio-economic divide. A lot of the technology went to the communities that had more money, not up into the hills. Short-term goals. So everything was focused on the Rio event with the Olympics and not on what was happening in 10 years' time, because that mayor, who is now going around the world speaking about his smart city, ain't going to be in office in 10 years' time. So it's about short-term goals. That's not good. And it's about IBM out of the box. And I'm not trying to bash IBM. God bless them. They do amazing things. And they do have open APIs, and they do amazing things. But a lot of people criticize the fact that they came in with the tool set, right? And it wasn't developed based on the needs of the people first. So when we're talking about smart Curacao, what do we mean? Well, maybe it's as simple as this. Maybe it's as simple as going up the road to Curacao University, up the boulevard, and seeing a smart road. This is a smart road because it simply allows people to do what they do in a different lane and is encouraging bike traffic. It's a good thing. It took me an hour to get from West Point here. Now, I realize I wouldn't ride my bike in most cases to an event, but you want to encourage alternative transportation, right? And we know that if you actually look at shared bicycles globally, it is the killer app. It's cost-effective, it's easy to implement, and outside of Airbnb and Uber that have a business imperative to grow, it's one of the most adopted solution globally for cities. That solution from Stockholm, adopted by Stockholm. And that's the problem. Nobody's going to get a long-term, multi-million-dollar contract based on that solution from Stockholm. And we need to be able to find those great ideas. Remember, they exist. They exist out there, whether they've been found or whether some other community has adopted them. Find them, bring them here, and let the people embrace them. So, in conclusion, I want you to think of your world as Star Wars and the Stormtrooper, right? This is how Star Wars began. This is when I was a kid. I went to Star Wars, and this was the center of the universe, the Stormtrooper, the baddie. And you used to shoot them with impunity in the Lucas movies, right? Bam, bam, they used to fly, you know? No blood, no gore. Yeah, it was great. But what we're talking about is there is a humanoid under that plastic. And we found that out in the last Star Wars movie, The Force Awakens. Suddenly we found out, dude, there's somebody in there. It's not just plastic, there's somebody in there. And that has changed, and I can tell you, the way we look at stormtroopers forever. No way can we shoot a stormtrooper and not be aware that under that stormtrooper costume there is somebody. We need to strip the technology away and understand what's inside the guts. And we have to get into that circle of trust with our consumers, with our businesses. Right now, where are we? We're here. You remember Meet the Fockers? Remember the movie? Yeah? You remember he's smoking, I don't think he's smoking a doobie, but the dad thinks he is, and he comes in and he says, you think you were in the family circle of trust? Well, now you're over there, right? He had to make his way back in. And this is our big data strategy, right? But that's not how you build trust. You gotta get the Ben Stiller hug, man, right? We need to embrace the humans and the consumers of our services and bring them in. And maybe that's through entrepreneurial activity, opening APIs for them to adapt their services on, grow business, let the economy take over, and foster innovation around things that aren't core to our economy, but will save our economy, like those solutions that I mentioned from Stockholm. And then we will make things speak. Thank you so much.
Excellent presentation.
Thanks. I guess I'm over. You don't want any questions, right?
Any questions from the audience?
Well, good. I answered everything. Yeah? Yes, sir.
Would you say that a personal experience is equal to building trust?
Will I say that personal experience is equal to building trust? Everything in our life is about trust. I think you brought that up, right? No, security. You brought security. We do not do anything, I can tell you, unless we feel comfortable with it. And so the reason that we never programmed that VCR, even though theoretically it wasn't that complicated, is it just had too many buttons. Just had one more button than was needed, right? So building trust is paramount to a technology society, because trust is what is going to drive adoption. If you don't drive adoption, then what are you doing this for? So you have to make it at some level humanoid. You have to make the services something which people embrace and don't feel concerned about using them, either from a UI perspective, like an ergonomics perspective, or from a security perspective, right? We have to, in our societies, in order for our societies to bloom, we need to feel safe walking down the street. That's what you were talking about, right, sir? So when you walk down the street and you feel safe, you're going to be able to do so many things. Just if you feel like somebody's going to mug you in the corner, that's not good, right? If you feel a house is going to be broken into, that's not good. Those are the things that have to be eliminated first. And so you have to not build things in a citadel. You want to come down and institute entrepreneurial activity, things that allow people in the community to embrace solutions. And you have to be you have to create a data economy, like Franklin talks about, so that everything else blooms on top, right? It's like a good gardener, right? So you build something that people then can create their own. You always like your mom's cooking better than somebody else's, right? So you want people in your community to build the services. You don't want somebody else coming in and saying, eat this, right?
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much.
Just to give you a short recap, Mr. Gary Schwartz basically woke us up this morning with his presentation by saying he was not going to talk about smart, but rather about the people that have to become smart, which is even a bigger challenge. He stressed the importance of data and communication to the humans, and also that you can only understand the smart nation if you have a profound understanding of who is going to use it. He also got attention to pay attention to the development of blockchains, which will be one of the most important pillars in the advancement of us towards the smart nation. He talked about how we find ideas, and that good ideas exist. We don't need to invent them, we have to find them. He also talked about the importance of building a relationship rather than a relation with technology. And at the end of the presentation, he talked about smart Curacao, saying, in order to become smart Curacao, it's a matter of finding great ideas, bringing them here, and let our own people embrace them. Allow me to introduce the next speaker today to you, and his name is Sylvanus Berkeley. And Mr. Sylvanus Berkeley is a professional with over 20 years of delivering on projects across technology, security, and marketing areas. Mr. Berkeley has a wealth of experience in areas such as development of technology, strategies, and roadmap, design of network transport infrastructure, development of marketing and corporate strategies, service delivery management, network security, and risk management. He holds an MBA from Heriot-Watt University from Edinburgh in the UK in general management and marketing. He has held many positions in telecommunication, ICT,